Hello, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to CWA's first forum of this year. I'm Vaselka. I'm the past president of CWA. I have the pleasure of virtually sitting with Dr. Rada Doytcheva, the founding principal and head of design at Rada Architects. So before I formally introduce her, just wanted to let everyone know that while she is presenting her life, work, and advocacy efforts, we're going to be dividing them into topics. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat during the presentation or type them at the question and answer button at the bottom of the screen. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I met Rada at the CWA Spring Brunch about 2.5 years ago and was just amazed by how much she's doing for our community of women architects and the multitude of her accomplishments. So yeah, she leads a successful practice that focuses on cities, schools, colleges, healthcare, commercial, and workplace design. Her awards are too many to list here, so we'll let her talk about it in the presentation. But just last year, she was named one of Crane's Noble Women in Construction and Design, where her career as architect and designer in the male-dominated field was highlighted. So congratulations. It was well-deserved. She's a strong advocate for female and minority architects. Due to her efforts, women and minority architects have more opportunities to participate in state and community college projects and target market procurement, a cause for which she's lobbied for many years. And one of the reasons she's going to talk today. She enjoys visiting architectural sites as part of her frequent travels around the world. She enjoys opera and the accompanying architecture of scenography, as well as architectural debates with her family at home, where everyone is an architect. So without further ado, I'll let Rada take over and I will ask the first question to kick off the presentation. So Rada, first question, how did you decide to pursue architecture?
Vaselka and everybody out there that I cannot see, touch, enjoy faces. This is really, I'm missing everybody on this call, but I want to say hi. I want to thank you, Vaselka, for this introduction of tall order. And to make up for its content, it would take several chilly nights to talk about a life of an architect who came to this country some 25 plus 30 years ago and practiced in this environment. I did go in the last days following this gracious invitation. I did go through archive of photos to go back and substantiate some of these notes and points made, to draw also some interesting information to depart from just a mere talk about projects. And that was actually a blessing in itself to spend the time and go back and think about what happened all these years and where we are now. So thank you. That was an added value for me personally. Thank you so much. Just a bit of a warning here that these are snapshots of various life situations of mine. And allow me, I'll share screen now. So with the question of how I started in architecture, I would like to give a little overview of where I'm from. I think this has an important part of who I am and how I have approached the profession and the overall experience of being an architect coming into a foreign country from another country to start a new life. Bulgaria is a country in southeastern Europe that borders on Greece and Black Sea, just known countries, and Yugoslavia, where Veselka's family is from, to the west. And the Danube, which is a major European river going through major capitals and cities of Europe like Budapest, Vienna. The Danube is the northern boundary. How it relates to somebody like me is that you grow up in a country of such old country with so much history and a good amount of remnants from this history. You really grow up surrounded by it. And the interesting part is that you don't pay much attention to it when you live there, when you grow up there. You go to your local grocery store, like your equivalent of your Mariano's, and you will be surrounded by Roman ruins and then seeing the towers of a Roman fortress. Or you will be going through the major plaza of downtown Sofia, and there will be constellations of different eras architecture, both Greek and Roman and Stalinist and French Baroque. And I'm showing some of these little views of the city, of the Ministry of Agriculture, club. The University of Sofia does look like this too. It's a chateau French style. And there is a good amount of the so-called Stalinist neoclassical architecture, which was exported in the times of the Soviets to many other countries that they occupied after World War II. We have these Wrigley building looking buildings, if I can just make it so simplistic. But we do have them in Sofia. They exist in Warsaw. They exist in Moscow. There's huge scale there. The University Lomonosov, the Lomonosov, the major hotel, whose name I can't remember, Ukraine, I think is called the hotel. They are a signature of this ideology, and the presence of this ideology was dictated by taking the language of classical architecture and order. There is right now, this is an older photograph in a cartoon, sort of showing Stalin. Of course, the other one I cannot even tell who that is. But right at this time, the city in Sofia has done a great job of opening up this whole plaza and covering it and creating something that's similar to the Roman Forum. Yet it's semi-covered and has a lot of friendly spaces, creating this vibrancy of the city. So growing up in a country where you are surrounded in your daily life by history, by styles, the sea with these colonies that were along the Black Sea, they gave me an idea of what the early Byzantine churches were. Some of the earliest Byzantine churches are actually in today's Bulgaria along this long sea coastline. This is a very, very rich heritage. At the same time, it's good to note that Bulgaria, very much like neighboring Serbia and Greece and other countries in Europe and in Asia and Africa as well, Northern Africa, they were under the Ottoman Turkish rule for centuries. So all of these institutions of the West that existed, universities and parliaments and other cultural big institutions, they did not exist until the 19th century. Yet there is this incredible culture that goes back. I'm showing here the Thracian tombs from BC. I believe there was a 4th century fresco within a tomb, which is just one of the many as you travel the country. As I move to another reason why and how I became an architect. I need to say that Bulgaria has incredible nature, so I would encourage travel for all the reasons of not only visiting sites and architecture and history, but it's nature, mountains, greenery, coastline. This is all a good package for a good purpose to um, visit one day. But how did I get so close to architecture, apart from being surrounded by buildings of various ages and expressions? It has a lot to do with my father, architect, who you see here. He's the second from right. I say here my father, you see my cursor, I think. And he has been not only a big figure in my mature life, but I have early memories from my father. First, through going to his studio, which I will show you his first studio, in a classical building supported by these atlases, the cantilevers, very rich building. The ambiance of an architectural studio of free-thinking people in white smocks with, at the time, very informal environment to do work, including some of them were taking afternoon naps on their drafting tables. There was a lot of discussions, I remember, and I remember some women there. That was very interesting to see people discussing work which I did not quite understand as a child yet. And also all of these wooden triangles. I remember in one of your CWA presentations, somebody showed an eraser shield, which maybe some of the audience doesn't know what it means, but I really wonder whether anybody has seen these big wooden triangles that people, and the parallels and how all of this work got done, and it got done. So in addition to being a frequent visitor and being just a standby on these conversations and a witness of my father's busy life, I also had intermixed with my children's books these architectural magazines that he was so lucky to get from a friend of his in Australia, as Bulgaria was a closed behind the curtain country. And it was very difficult, even when I was a student, to find out what the rest of the world was doing. You had to really work hard to find information. But this Miss Benderall devoted whole Architecture d'Aujourd'hui magazine. The whole magazine is devoted to him. I still have it. I have it here in Chicago with me. This was something that I was going through very often as a child, and just wondering how different things were. I was in a country that did not have such modern architecture. This just looked like extraterrestrial. It was just amazing, and this started the importance also of Miss Benderall in my mind as an architect. My dad's studio was up here, and I thought I had this photo, which I happened to have my daughter here at the time when I took the photo, or maybe some 10 years ago. And I would like to go to some of what he impressed with, not just me as an architect, but also contributed to the architectural community there in Bulgaria, in Eastern Europe. He was a consultant to Germany and sent to do a hospital in Vietnam at some point, and ultimately was also awarded an honorary fellowship in the American Institute of Architects. So what he did, he was one of the first architects there in this very classical and old traditional environment to introduce the modern, more of a Miesian look, functional look, the modern architecture into hospitals mainly and laboratories. This was quite significant because of this buildings and hospitals at this time were mostly done on the pavilion type in very Florence Nightingale looking old buildings connected with hallways, and doing multi-story hospitals with modern look, with modern layout, created a totally new approach to pretty much building the whole network of the country. He was one of the first doctors in architecture through his work describing the relationship between the efficiency planning and the economics, the results of buildings and healthcare delivery. I am not describing this very well as the words ring in my mind in Bulgarian, but he tied the importance of the functional planning of hospitals to the results. He was really one of the first to do this. He inspired me in some ways to pursue a similar topic later on, as I was finishing my master's to transition into doing a doctoral degree. Or I took at the time another master I took by the horn. And this master was the developing diagnostic podiums in hospitals that became so difficult to manage with new equipment, with the flows of inpatients, outpatients, and the mixing and the problems that it creates. All of this was interesting to sort out. And did I do this? Yes, I did. And I did study experience of other countries through various trips and grants. So this was my growth as an architect, starting architect in Bulgaria. But it's also interesting to say that while this was going on, I got slowly indoctrinated into the profession. I did not think I was going to be an architect for a long time. I was studying languages. I was in a school that was heavy on math and sciences. I was thinking I was going to be a diplomat, an ambassador that speaks numerous languages. And this kind of gave way gradually to this one day when I decided to apply to architecture school there. The first couple of years, and before I go to my first couple of years of practice there, as quickly after this, I came to the United States. But before I go there, I thought I'd show you one fun photo. These people here in work clothes, workman clothes, and I am one of them, the one to the left. This is from my student years in architecture. It was the practice that we did not like, to be sent every year 1 month on a construction site during our study. This was something like internship mandatory, where we had to work as construction workers. I happened to have this very bleak site where we were moving dirt at the time, but I spent 1 month on a site as a deputy superintendent on a high-rise hotel construction on the Black Sea with the reinforced concrete structure and concrete trucks coming, and the dynamic of all of what I saw in front of my eyes happening. Not only the beauty of concepts from architecture school and the knowledge that we got there, very strong program over 5.5 years, but we were thrown in the realities of really how things happen. We are more than just artists or painters. We have our work is very tangible and needs to get done, and we are a part of it through the end. Just a quick glimpse of my first projects there in these countries at the time. I believe it's still like this in Eastern Europe. You get your diploma as an architect, and you are immediately doing projects. You're not starting drawing details or carrying water for the architects in the studio. I did work immediately, started and completed while I was actually going to the US, but a health center and also a sanatorium hotel. It's for recovery of people with lung diseases. These were projects that were quite remarkable, and they made a lot of sense, and they were published in this short time and even made it to Udo Koterman, who was a professor. The late Udo Koterman was a professor in Washington University in St. Louis, who wrote a book about Eastern Europe and its architecture. And interestingly enough, in this early time, which I did not even realize the reality yet of working in the United States, he was saying that there are more women architects in Eastern Europe. There are more. I mean, I have the text for you here, translation from German. The book was published in German. How I also made this jump from Bulgaria to the United States also came through my very frequent engagement in my student years and thereafter in various conferences, conventions, biennale. The Bulgarian Architecture Institute created a World Biennale of Architecture. This was the first architecture biennale in the world, I believe, with a very strong leader in place, an architect who's still around. He brought the luminaries of the world at the time. I was so lucky to meet and talk and sit at the same table with people like Charles Jentz, Hermann Herzberger, Otto Frey, Felix Candela. These were incredible encounters and inspiration for somebody to think big, to want to see the world, which was my goal, to leave Bulgaria and come to the United States. I am showing here on the same slide something I found, which is from my later years when I came here, and I made sure I get involved in the international activity of the AIA. And this was a continuation of what I was doing early on. It continued, and it continues to this very day through my involvement in AIA Europe. This is, by the way, Richard Rogers down here that I was sitting next to and presenting in this conference, and on which I was the chair of the international committee of the AIA. So I did come to the United States on an invitation from the American Planning Association, and was able to continue and work at one of the local large at the time offices, which is no longer around. And from healthcare work initially, which allowed me to be able to start working immediately. My knowledge and experience in this field was a good passport to starting work. I gradually transitioned into designing work for high-rises and commercial complexes in the firm's now insatiable appetite to do work abroad. And I was the one who, under whose hands, mostly, this first winning project in China, in Shenzhen, China, was done. And here's the project actually done in a mural on one of the buildings that was going to be demolished to make room for the building. So that's kind of a nice little gesture to the coming project. And I happen to have a photo of it. So this was a time of learning while working in these first years in the United States, and being able actually very quickly at the time, the formalities of getting reciprocity for your education were not as huge as now, and CARB did not exist. And I was able to sit through the exam very quickly and to obtain my license on the first go. And now Veselka asked me in our conversations before, are you going to share that you were the only woman in this office, and when you got your license, people did not quite like it, some of them. I did share this with a few people, and I'll say that there was such environment. I did not pay attention to it quite a bit. And there was so much for somebody coming from another country to make a life here that I just went through my first years not paying attention to anything but moving forward. And in this moving forward, I landed on a project that's right up my alley. It was the laboratory, science laboratory building. I'm still with this other firm. I am not saying the name. There is an abbreviation of the name down here. They're no longer around. But this was right up my alley because it gave me an opportunity, this project in which I've played a central role, to bring in some of this European thinking and some of my father's thoughts about how to structure such buildings, in particular with the modules and with how the services are distributed. And to this very day, this project is one of the unique laboratory buildings. It's a 4-story science building in ISU. It's now not such a new building, but it's still valid in these concepts of how the laboratories are laid out and how the services are broken per module a little bit, and not unlike the big idea of McMaster Hamilton Zeidler, if some of you are working in this field of healthcare, did these super universal floors where you can move furniture, not so much furniture, but equipment and lab tables around, but your services always appear in a rational place. This is versus what was done at the time a lot and still done, of having in 2 places in the building someplace huge shafts with huge ducts that distribute and create very low ceilings throughout. And in this case, this was not even possible as we had to connect to another building with low floor-to-floor heights. This was a great experience with great thank you notes. I thought I put in a few notes here and there from what people said, but mostly to also give a little bit of sprinkling of this sentiment, which in the last years has surfaced of certain discrimination and certain not such a good environment for women and women architects. And that is what actually happened in my case after leaving the firm where I did so much, to be actually not allowed free pass, but a lot of backdoor hurdles and statements that I was helping on projects that, I was nobody. But I was really somebody. At least I can say I was the first woman licensed architect in this office, and that was not a small office. So this is all water over the dam, and I think these days this should not be happening, and there is a much better deterrent these days from people doing this to other women architects. So with this environment, to which I gave you a very little taste of what was going on, I did leave as soon as I could leave this office, thinking that good as I am, hardworking, work will come to me. I'll look for the work and it will come to me. And I've said this at other events with women architects and architects, how deceiving this is until you go out on your own, and it is so lonely, and it is so difficult to be seen in the same way as you were when you were in a larger firm. Obviously, some other architects and women architects have done a better job of taking work with them, or having a setting where they can go back to a client and continue. I would highly recommend, if there is anywhere a question here of how from a younger group here, I would strongly recommend that anybody starting should really pave their way for an easier start. There's no need to suffer. So with the difficulty of getting work locally as a new firm, pretty much on my own, and a few students I had as I had started teaching as an adjunct in Triton. With a little work, I had no choice but to turn to my contacts in China that were really very, very good people to work with, that also saw certain similarity in where I came from and where they were. Is again reminding Bulgaria was under communism, so was China. And the work that I did there brought me back, this time on my own, to consult on a number of trips over several years to southern China and the mostly Shenzhen and Shekou. I'm showing here working in the hotel on a master plan for Shekou, which is the port city of Shenzhen. And it's a port terminal and mixed-use development. And I had never done a port terminal before. And there is a series of instances in my life as an architect where I learned to do certain things, but I went on to do things I had never done before. That's actually not so bad. But it kind of points that, you know, we need to have some fundamental approaches how to tackle answers and be able to do any kind of project. This is, as a matter of fact, the philosophy of where of how architecture is practiced where I come from, and mostly in Europe, I would say. I don't know whether all of my European friends will agree to this, but we are educated there to be able to do any project. So specialization used to be not so big as it is here. Here, it's a big deal to have experience in certain area, and it's a competitive advantage here. So these are very interesting first years of not having work locally, traveling to China, starting on my MBA, as I also figured that with not enough work, I might as well be doing something and getting another degree. And there's some answers here for some of my friends and colleagues, and actually I have just a recent one who's doing an architect who's doing an MBA. Just one little secret for you, that finishing an MBA business school and getting an MBA is not going to make you immediately a successful manager, leader, architectural firm. This is not the only thing. It may add a lot to your life, but for me, it was exceptional experience. But I also learned in these years that I want to be nothing else but an architect, even if I make less money. So these are life decisions. So this is Ocean Harbor Plaza here. I'm going to move on as I'm taking, I think, a little too long here. So I'll just speed this up. In the gradually things opened up as a firm for me, and I'll get to this a little later, but the Chicago Public Schools Capital Improvement Program was a blessing. This is the late 90s, beginning of 2000 program. I know it helped not just us, but it helped many other architects in town. It also feeds into my strategy and opinion that public sector can do a lot to help architects that have been historically disadvantaged, and they do this a lot. And public sector actually helped a lot of big firms nowadays to build their portfolio and be who they are. To name a few, Perkins and Will was doing schools. C.F. Murphy was doing McCormick Place. This is public sector. Or doing the Civic Center. This is C.F. Murphy again. So the project that we're seeing is a little bit of outside of the Chicago Public Schools work that got us going, but it was one very good memory of a client who believed in me, although I was a new firm, and gave me to do a new building in Schaumburg that carries a lot of interesting concepts in it. There's no time for all of this to talk about, but having people believe in you and giving you a chance, and that's in between other things that should be happening, is quite interesting and needs to be taken seriously and snowballed into other opportunities. I did mention CPS Capital Program, and we have I believe on our site, a map of our Chicago Public Schools projects over time. I think the map is already old as we've added quite a few. And heads down to what's going on there is covering this enormous system of buildings and how the work is done. I can't say good enough things of how important this has been for us, for the people with me. And this is a good moment to say that, yes, I did start to grow like a firm with people that believed in me too. So it's a multi-headed monster of how you get to a point to be, I'm going to use this business word, going concern. You're a firm, but not just by name, but you are churning out work. So this is a true architecture firm. And in the case of my background and type of work that I wanted to do, there was no way I could do it alone. So I've been extremely fortunate, and the people you're seeing are still with me. One of them actually left just a month ago after 20 years, but the other, Bill Sitton, still with me in one of the foundations of what we do there in our firm. Over time, I have been also very excited to be invited in various capacities for visiting lectures, also to share my programming specialty experience. This is IIT. And at some point of time, and belongs a little more to the past than the present, but you encounter another woman among clients that believes in you. And this has been actually one of my points in my advocacy efforts, that the chances for us, we have several avenues to get more work, and one of them is really the women on the other side that could open doors for us. This was Andrea Bauer at Capital Development Board and the testing lab in IDOT. A whole series of student residencies we did in these years, and this is probably the only project I did that it does not have a modern expression, but it had to be that way, and this is why I said the projects no one wanted. Why? Because we had these Victorian houses in Naperville across the street that would fight tooth and nail what gets built across. So instead of having a 4-story student residence hall block there, hitting them in the face, I did break this down quite a bit to make it sympathetic to the neighborhood. Another project for Wheaton, surprised at the opening where the Dean of Humanities, this woman, Jill Baumgartner, gets up and recites a poem she did about the project. And just one sentence here defines what my goals have been, in addition to the functionality of the work I've pursued. But this light expands through slanted panes and startles through mirror tubes. She got it here. The quality of light, the bringing light to people is very important. I will, for a moment, I think, pass to Veselka or get to a point. I will do this and see how we're doing with the time.
Yeah, we can go 20 more minutes and then we'll do question and answers, but we have a few questions for you. One of them was the next topic, which is how you started your firm and what challenges you encountered. And then in addition to that, if you can touch on when you became a mother and how did you juggle that with starting your own firm and obtaining an MBA?
Okay, so I will not show images for a moment to try to answer these questions. They are really deep questions. You really hit the nail on the head. Um, this was how I started the firm and the challenges. The challenges were enormous. The challenges were first and foremost from being able to find work. Is without work, we can't practice, we can't live. Some of us can live if they have support. I came to this country without family on my own. It's an exceptional commitment. I'm not saying this to flatter myself, but to also say that there is some sacrifice here that we should not be placed in a position to make. So I spent many years with too much work, with no holidays, with no personal life. This went on for a long time. I think it shouldn't be that way. I think there is huge inequality in procurement in our environment. This inequality is in many areas. Of course, it's founded in the competitive environment we're in, but there are other aspects that need to change so that somebody like me does not become a mother so late, which I did, and can be with her daughters, children more often, which I regret. So the short story here is that enormous commitment to making all of these things happen. MBA, getting up at 5 a.m. to do problems in investments because there's a lot of math in an MBA. An architect does math, but this is different stuff. Are you willing to make the sacrifice? I'm not saying everybody should, but as long as there is some proportional reward at the end, reward, I am not saying award, reward, it's justified. But in the last years, I am also questioning why there should be such a huge effort by us women in particular. It should get easier on us. With this, I could probably, Veselka, move quicker to the last portion of advocacy.
You have time to talk about how you started your firm and show
Okay. So I'm going to share the screen if you allow me again. And the short story, the technicality of this question, technically, I just left and started putting together the backbone of a firm and outlined what I had learned a little bit in various ways as to having a marketing plan, having a strategy, who do I call, how I do a brochure, where the projects we get, how I get certified for a WB. There is like a lot of technicality to set this up. So they are achievable. You have to stay on them. To this very day, I know some women and minority architects that just can't get to get their certification. Yes, it's tough. There's a lot to do, but some prioritizing and some organizational talent and approach can get you there. Again, what really helped me continue as a firm was my ability to do work which I did in China so that I can get some revenue and some projects. And also my ability to work on projects that were needed immediate help, like the capital improvement program. And very importantly, the fact that I had a strategy where to look for work. Now, this goes on for a long time until you figure it out where you want to look for work, is you can't be everywhere and look for work everywhere too. So how I started my firm with difficulties, with a long gestation period. Um, and then it started growing. And I want to get to that point too, to talk more about what happens next. To start somehow. What goes on next is important. So should I share the screen again?
Yep. Yep, we could see it.
Okay. So some of the important, there's like little stepping stones over these years, and they tie into why I did certain things, but work for city colleges. There were some very interesting concepts that I went in and just forced myself in with ideas, and force is the operative word here, but sometimes you have to. And stodgy and traditional places like this, bottom right, the before, going to doing math in an environment that looks like a birch forest, or has the arabesque table, or has the bird's nest, the dividers. There's a lot of theory about respite and nature, and yes, it's all true and good, and there's a lot of these ideas I took forward wherever I could on fairly small projects, because the big projects for a long time, and it got worse over time, went mostly to larger firms. I have to say that. Interesting, the guys in the tutoring lab who I meet there to stop by to take some photos, they said, "You did this project?" Okay, that's indicative to some of these prejudices we need to deal with. Malcolm X College was one project that finally, as the size of a project came to our office, as the size commensurate with our ambition to transform, and also as a project that I highly admired the building, Gene Summers, Mission grid, and large spans there. These are huge plate glass windows. I saw this as an incredible canvas to reorganize a very stodgy layout. This project went on for a while, for 2 years, ready for bids to transform. When this project was shelved, the building demolished, and a new building built across the street. Not everything was lost there, as in this moment, the visionary, like in one of these stepping stones, is our lives as architects are a series of stepping stones. The campus architect there thought, "Oh, Rada, you can take a stab as to what happens if we expand over the expressway. Please do." So this started a seed of something I'll show a little later. This is a college building with a walkway over the expressway. And in between, just continuing the thought of challenging conservative thinking, University of Chicago Language Center, not a large project, but huge in ideas, in doing pods and open spaces and expressions in times when nobody was doing them. What happens? The provost comes and says, you're not gonna turn these colored lights on. We're a university. So this is the prejudice. Or people start coming to her wanting more of the same space. This is considered not good for them, that people want. Now everybody wants to have the space, the Center for Languages. So they're interesting. I mean, our lives as architects are really have these vicissitudes that are unexpected in many ways. ISU, after asking for 10 years, after I did outstanding work for them with the older firm, but they could not quite disassociate me with the older firm, finally gave me great work on student residencies. And again, I positively forced my way into creating a gateway into these three buildings that are interconnected. Another big part of our work was the work on Outer Drive East. We don't have much time, but this is Lakeshore East. And this started a whole revitalization effort, which is worth a talk of its own. It all started with the swimming pool that became a lighthouse for the park and a lot more than that. But it's important to say that at one moment after we had won a big project at University of Illinois South Campus, only to lose it to a large firm because it changed, and losing other bigger projects that started with us, but somehow they magically went to other firms after that without us not having done anything wrong, just the opposite. I figured we have to become our own clients. And this is Cabrini Green that was on the cusp of when they started demoing the buildings. Here I am with the U of I model, disappointed we did not continue on the project. We became a developer while being an architect for several years. So this is Larrabee and Clybourne, and it's one of the first green, silver, green certified buildings at the time when mostly public money allowed to be able to do green projects. A lot said about this project, again, subject of another conversation and awards, as you mentioned, Veselka, at the beginning. And I would like to say that with us starting to see this plateau of our work gets better, our work gets more vigorous, we're a larger firm, but it all plateaus out, and the big awards and the big project go to other big firms. I will, excuse me for repeating this. We created our own award with my father, architect. So we have Architecture Travel Award almost every year. One year, we did this whole team of people went to China. Another year after we finished the Dutch School Adaptive Reuse to the training facility, CPS training facility. This was a very, very good project, very tough. This tough team, as a part of the team, went to New York on a travel award. A few favorite clients I want to go through, the ideal client when we move to do more healthcare. We have to move with the markets. That's another thing, that being a smaller firm, you have to be very nimble where the work is. And building on my past experience in healthcare, we went into this market. The ideal client who cares about functionality and making 3 of the same operating rooms, not different, although spaces are different, yet talking about the aesthetics of German cars, or ready to adopt the shapes and forms of the human body, and listening and having a productive, respectful relationship. My other life, I lived many lives at the same time, was with AIA Europe. And every year, 2-3 times, I would go to these wonderful conferences, have taken some of you with me. And some of you, I think you're on the call, have actually become even more involved than me. The competition in Cyprus made me feel how important it is to work with younger people, to be involved in teaching, to teach them and to learn from them. It was incredibly good. I need to mention it. And same these connections from Europe I brought to Chicago. This is a sustainability symposium for John Marshall Law School with the chief planner for Hamburg. That was a big deal to bring somebody with this knowledge. CSU project, this project got done through construction documents and did not get built. And just using a chance to show you and then some of how I work with sketches and people. And the Illinois Medical District Bridge, whose seed was planted early on. If you remember, I showed you the Malcolm X extension. This is an important link between north and south in this area, which provides an opportunity to do so much for people. And this is something that I personally invested time in advocating for. Not that I got a commission right away. We are now under contract with the Cook County Department of Transportation, but many years of advocacy in what I believed in. Projects recently finished for the Bark District. That's just another very fulfilling client to work with, fulfilling relationship, and another doctor favorite client for who we finished an urban clinic just recently. Sorry to rush through this, but it's important to, I think, to get to some of these issues of the women architects advocacy. And the foundation of what my point has been is that we cannot grow from this handful of firms. I have the numbers. I had before the 22 firms in the Chicago area out of 795 are women-owned firms. Now there is more, the numbers have grown, but some of these just don't do projects. They do other specialties. So I don't know whether we count them in this, but we need economic prosperity. We need to get women businesses, women-owned architecture businesses that are naturally led by women architects, be given more opportunities, and they in turn can grow more of us, and they can be role models. Without the economic prosperity, this is going to continue to be for us to do sharing and therapy of what happened to us and what we didn't get and how we could get it. But having an engine of advocacy that will work together and synchronize to start assuring this flow of work is extremely important. I worked for 10 years alone at this end, and this goes back to 2012, when after 2 years of asking Capital Development Board, state of Illinois, this is the biggest developer in state of Illinois, for 2 years I asked for information as to where did the work go? Where did the work go? I don't get that answer. What's going on here? Finally, after many meetings with various people and many good intentioned people that just need to be involved and hear the stories. This is what advocacy is about. Finally, information that came to us was processed and became evident that over 1 year of awards, 40% goes to 3 firms only in the state. This can't happen anymore. It took 10 years for this to change. And I'll show you, there's a few more slides toward the end. Some of these numbers I mentioned, Cook County has the size of many prosperous European countries, but we have a handful of women-owned design firms. And I adjusted this to 54 today, but it's really not all of these are doing architecture projects. So it's just very, very sad. Some of the percentages of women architects in Europe, much higher. I've shown this at other events. One event that was quite well accepted was the one in New York, which allowed me to work with Jamie Rhee, with Karina Sanchez. Well, Michael is from our state group of architects. But these 2 women, over a year of preparations, I really talked to them about what our issues are. And I really got them on our side. And there's many more people here. Some of them keep in touch to this very day, or I hope you've taken some of what we discussed. About 6 months after the convention, Karina Sanchez, in 1 day, awarded 17 projects just to NBWB firms, all of them, and we are here on this photo. This was an amazing transformation from the first day I talked with her to the day when we saw this award. And I'm sure she was not the only one, but there is always a leader in these cases, and she was one. Jamie Rhee is one of the most friendly. She's now the Commissioner of Aviation for Chicago, and she was a Chief Procurement Officer of City of Chicago for many years. She is an incredible advocate for us, and she also demonstrated how we can find our allies And we can only use our allies if we educate them. And she herself at the meeting in our chapter, which was done a year after the convention meeting on the same topic, and some of you I'm sure were there, she even admitted, she said, well, Rada has coached us. We do need to get our story out. So here we are, excuse me, a group of women that started forming in the last years. And this is Veselka, and this is Alicia Ponce, and this is Mary Brush, and there is Robin, who is not on this photo. She's now a deputy commissioner in the city. We started meeting and talking about this advocacy together, and this is one of our meetings. We had several seminal meetings with key people, not one time, but they were the closing of certain paths that I had started by myself, this time with allies. So here we are with the Commissioner of Aviation talking about how we can get to the table. And indeed, the target market contracts for architects, which was omitted from the previous administration, and target market, for those of you who are not familiar, means procurement for firms that have at least 51% of the work done by the certified woman or minority architect. So while the construction managers and other entities got target market advertised for the airport, the architect's contract was omitted by the previous administration. Much as I personally, again, advocated, met, spoke at events, FWC and other events, it was not until Jamie Renow becoming a commissioner and until after our meeting with these ladies you just saw, that this target market proposal, RFP, request for proposal, came out. And it's actually out right now for submissions at the beginning of February. So it took years for these things. With the CDB, it took years to get to that point. This is a project that we just got. So here you can start from the left with me and around. This is an impressive mosaic of women professionals. And this is something that I had put together, met with the CDB board several times, and with the assistance and presence of my women architects friends. Alicia here was with me, where we explained why it's important to move to this point, to really give attention to giving women businesses more awards in time when most of the work now is coming from Capital Development Board. There is a tremendous transformation going on there. It's not just us that they gave us a large project. They've been giving in the last 1 year to 5, 6 other women's firms similar large and larger awards, which is tremendous. This was a path over almost 10 years that was walked successfully and started giving its results. I wonder whether I should stop at this point. I have a few final ones here, but there may be some questions and we may be running out of time. That's okay.
We have till 7, so about 20 more minutes. There are some questions. The questions are, what are your advice to the younger generation of women architects on how to start advocating? And also, what are your challenges that you faced advocating? And I think there's one more, but we'll let you answer that one first.
Okay. So answering kind of for both at the same time. The challenges that I had encountered over time in what I reported about were first that I have to make a living in the meantime. have to find work, do the work, organize people, and so forth. I mean, those of you who do this know. That's one challenge, which says that it's best if many of us, or somehow in groups, we do this together. The other challenge is that you get enemies, and unfortunately, this has been the case with me in the case of the UFI project, with my lamenting there that we got bumped from a project that was awarded competitively to us. The same individual who was heading the facilities there went to University of Chicago, where rumors get spread about very successful work that it was not successful. And it's just things that don't have good taste at all. They don't even sound good to be talked about. But yes, there are risks to make people uncomfortable with you, and retaliation is possible. But the sum total is what's important, and especially if there is more of our local component or national AIA participation, true participation beyond nice talking and nice sharing, and we need steps how to tackle all of this. It's just like a business plan. You have to go in 1, 2, 3 and do it. It's going to be less of this retaliation and less of the negative part. So as far as the advice for, the question was about how women architects could do advocacy. That was the question.
Yep, how to start.
Right. Well, this goes again to the same statement I just made. We do need to educate people around us. People in procurement, they don't know, they're not supposed to know. We can't blame them for not knowing what our issues are. For instance, I'll give you one example. People were very surprised when I kept telling them that women architects and minority architects, for that matter, have a tough time getting on a team with another architect and be their percentage. I got these looks like, oh, really? Yes, really, because people don't want to share their fee, and can't quite blame them for this. They get the engineers, consultants to fulfill these percentages, and we get left out. That's not always the case, but it's the majority of the cases. So this leads to educating people. Educating is the operative word here, but to suggest that the drive to prime contracts, whether it's formalized, like I mentioned, the target market RFP at the airport. This is a formalized way to bring more women and minority as prime contractors, to informal, like the CDB development. These people these days, I have talked to for 10 years. They're pretty much the same with a few new faces. In these 10 years, I also had them meet with Hedy Retner, the Women Business Development Center leader. She's amazing. I had them meet with FWC, Beth Doria, who's the Federation of Women Contractors, and sit around the table with them. I went to Springfield for a bill to lobby for a bill to stop this uncontrolled procurement at community colleges. Well, talking about retaliation there, that's again another story. But some of these things happen over time. They can't happen over one day. So the answer here is that tell our story, offer solutions, and work as a group. This is why I'm so excited with this group that we called WAA, the Women Advocates in Architecture. And I have a couple of slides maybe to supplement, and what I said would be okay to share.
Sure, yep.
Actually, in our little manifesto of our group, this is what we have, like a standard document to take with us to these meetings, like with the board, CDB board, when Alicia and I went, we took these little squares with us and gave a handout. This is what we're doing. We're not here to complain with you. We're here to thank you for what you did so far, and please do more of it, and please do it in that way. So we use the word lobby here, and I believe we changed it. There is a better word is advocate than lobby, as lobby has a different meaning in this country. But going back to professional organization, the AIA, the local component, this could be a great ally. The knowledge communities, the national AIA, CWA is right here, the public sector leadership. There is a group at the city of Chicago. They used to meet every last Thursday of the month with representatives of all kinds of consultants and the big heads of all agencies. The only group that was missing were the architects. The architects weren't there. Our chapter is more concerned with other issues, very important issues, but this has been a little bit of a back story. The public universities, the private sector committed to diversity, the big institutions are not unlike the public sector. And what I mean is the big hospitals or the utilities. And the big hospitals have diversity groups. Everybody has them now. This is great news. But we need to get the message there that we need the prime contracts. We can't go with the little pieces. We need what CDB did, from awarding $25,000 in fee projects 10 years ago to women like me. Now they're awarding $60 million projects. This is tremendous. So I said this many times about no small percentages, the set-asides, targeted procurement, changing of the selection process to eliminate this built-in inequality. It's important for us to talk to procurement people about the inequality, what it does to us. And we have between ourselves many times, and recently with Alicia, we were talking about this, how if you don't get to work on complex assignments, you can't grow as an architect. You can grow as staff, and you cannot attract staff if you only do these little jobs. So furthermore, the firms that benefited from public sector, they took it to private sector and built empires. And then we get compared to them during procurement. That's not right. That's inequality. So all of this said in a positive, solicitous way, with suggesting solutions, can go a long way. I do have more suggestions here. I had this came from actually the talk at the AIA chapter. And with this, I will say that whoever on this call would like to further connect, we should connect, as this was the case after every event I was involved in. There was this nucleus starting to grow. So there is one added benefit of today's talk. Forget about how Rada became an architect. Maybe that was entertaining, but we can work as a group. We can make a change as a group much better together as a group.
Thank you, Rada. There are a few more questions. There's one in the chat. Are there any additional standards that we should consider for celebrating women designers that move beyond ownership percentage alone?
This is a very interesting question. Do you mind repeating it to make sure I understood it correctly?
So are there additional standards that we should consider for celebrating women designers that move beyond ownership percentage alone? And then that's supplemented by, I react mostly to firms that bend the rules with ownership, not reflecting true dedication to employing and supporting women in the profession.
This is a very good question, and if I understand in the crux of it, um, it really talks to so many other cases of women within other firms, not just to women-owned firms. And with the time and with how of where I was these years of where I was advocating, I put my focus today on the women-owned businesses. But absolutely true that enough growth and enough participation should be happening in other firms. And what was happening to me when I was in another firm so many years ago should absolutely be not happening anymore. There should be a huge deterrent even from the massive now drive for inclusion. Yes, I think we should celebrate big time. And I think that women that have risen in other firms, we can see this happening more and more, are put on front page. They are celebrated. Absolutely yes. There's absolutely yes to this. I will go back and say again that the more of us who are also the business owner in addition to the architect, the more of us as a group, as a number, the more chances that there are out there that we will have more women architects employed by us and promoted by us. I have a hard time finding to work with women architects. I've said this to others. So we need more. We know the 18%, we've heard about that one, that 50-50 graduate from architecture school, but 18% only are licensed. So a lot of barriers. Can we have daycare for our children? Yes, we can, if we get more sizable projects that we can pay for it. Yes, we can create communism within our offices if we get to the table to have the large, good assignments that can create this economic prosperity. No wonder some firms really have prospered. They prospered on good projects. Good people, good projects.
Okay, that's a good segue into if you have any advice for somebody wanting to start their own firm, and when to know that they're ready, what would that be? Did you know that you were ready to start your own firm?
Actually, I don't know that I knew I was ready. I was just in a situation where I just had to disassociate with where I was. And during this disassociation, again, my father architect kept asking me, why don't you try? So you do need somebody to inspire you. Um, he has been this incredible person who's still around, actually 97. So back to when one is ready, I would say that, and I know, and I've promised to a few colleagues, ladies architects, to talk with them. I don't know that they are on this call, but I would strongly discourage people right after school to jump into having their own firms unless there is a setting where they have project work that's tailored to their amount of knowledge and to their family situation. Let's say you are at home with 2 small kids, you know how to do certain things, you do them. But in general, on a scale of being a midstream firm, mid-sized firm that does this array of projects that I showed and more, you do need, I think, to learn quite a bit, and hopefully you can land in a firm where you can learn. That is so important. I think honestly that I may even have started too early before I learned enough, that I learned on the job the first years. I will admit that I did not know how to do shop drawing submittals. I was a designer in the other firm. I did not know what to do, but I learned how to do it. Not that this only by itself will make you an architect, but there is so much learning in architecture. So number one, learn enough so that you have the magic powers. Number two, it's smart if you can develop your contacts for projects so that you don't have to knock on doors for several years before you get work. So these two things in place, let's just throw a number here, maybe 10 years after school. We use this 10 years very well. Maybe that's discouraging, maybe 5, maybe not less than 5. So that's an interesting question.
Okay, looks like we have time for one more question and then we will stop. But a similar topic would be that women in large firms have rarely been given actual leadership roles in designs. Most successful women are on the management or technical side. So I guess the question maybe is how to shine in a bigger firm, how to stand out and get more design roles, get more leadership roles in larger firms?
That is, I think, a very tough one. And if I go back to my time in a larger firm, I didn't see the barriers. I just forged right ahead, throwing my work, my sketches. This is what I think should be done. Staying nights to present it, to go back and say, so that people say, oh, we can use her. Now, it's in corporate architecture, there will always be other considerations other than finding and seeing and appreciating the talent in one of these women that need to rise as much as the management. But staying on it, and I would say there's nothing wrong to find your supporters within the upper management and talk to them. I don't think there's anything wrong in going there and saying, look, I really feel that I do need to be there, and this is why. And then go again, and then go to somebody else and find an opportunity to contribute, to shine. These are the difficulties in a larger firm. This is the trade-off of working on glamorous projects, but being in a corporate setting.
Okay, well, thank you, Rada. Thank you for virtually taking us to Europe through your stories. Much appreciated since we can't go there now. And telling us about your life and your projects and your advocacy efforts and giving us advice. I think going forward, this is amazing. A lot of very helpful information. So yeah, thanks again. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing for women architects. And yeah, the accomplishments are inspiring.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled by this group. I know the group, and I will be thrilled to hear from whoever would like to continue the conversation. And thank you so much for having me. Sorry if I had difficulties technical. I don't know how we went. It looks good on my screen. But thank you again. It's been my honor to be here tonight.
Okay, thanks, Rada, and thanks everybody for joining.